Today, I'm going to get all 40 achievements for Sonic X Shadow Generations. This game is actually 2 separate games, and I decided that I will start with Sonic Generations since I'm already familiar with this game. The first achievement was easy enough. You just have to beat both stages for Green Hill Zone. One thing that I already noticed with this game are the different quality of life updates. There are no lives in this game, and you can also have more than one save file now. This game also gives you an option to change to the original Sonic Generation controls, which was the first thing I ended up doing. But for some reason the D-pad doesn't work, and it turns out it was a PC only thing. Anyway. For my second achievement, I beat both stages for Chemical Plant Zone. So far, the game's movement has been identical to the original, and as such, I wanted to try out one of the speedrunning skips for Chemical Plant, where you can go out of bounds and skip the entire 2D section for modern Sonic. And this is where I found out that they've patched this glitch. In Chemical Plant, we are introduced to the Red Rings collectibles, and the brand new Chao collectibles, original to this remaster only. I will have to collect all of these for the achievements, but I'll get to those later. For now, I will just collect them as I find them. I completed both stages for Sky Sanctuary for the third achievement, completing all of the stages for the classic era zones. But before we can fight the boss for this era, we have to complete a mission from each zone. These missions are essentially mini levels, with different challenges or gimmicks tied to each one, stuff like beating a stage with a certain power-up, going through a specially crafted obstacle course, or racing your doppelganger on the original stage itself. There are 90 of these stages in total, which we will have to beat all of them for an achievement, but to continue with the story, we only have to beat 1 per each zone, so we only have to beat 9 to beat the entire game. We also unlocked the rival fight for this era, which for this case is Metal Sonic. Beating him gives us a Chaos Emerald, which we will have to get all 7 to finish the game, and to get an achievement for that, but we also get an achievement for beating Metal Sonic himself. With the missions and rival fight done, we can get to the classic era boss. I tried doing the speedrunner trick for the Death Egg Robot, but each time I tried doing it, the boss would just squish me so hard that I would just fall through the floor and die, so I had to beat this boss the normal way. In the original game, you would fall through the floor like this as well, but it happened very rarely. All of the cutscene controversy aside, one thing that I really like with the remaster are the little changes made in almost every cutscene. It gives me a reason to rewatch them again and just to see if I can spot any differences between the original, whether it's just like dialogue change or an animation change. If there weren't any changes to the cutscenes, I would have just skipped all of them because, let's be honest, nobody plays Sonic Generations for the story. I wish there was a feature to view the original cutscenes somewhere though, to like help preserve history, but the game is still listed on Steam, kind of. The Speed Highway skip for modern Sonic works. A few months ago, I made a video where I showed off the coolest speedrunning tricks for the original game. I'll be trying each of these tricks for this video, along with a few other ones that I haven't mentioned. The City Escape stages were the same, but they're always a blast to play through. I spotted my first Chao on Seaside Hill Classic and picked them up. Since they're the new collectibles, they've just kind of been plopped into the game, and they will most likely just be found on little paths like this, or in the far corners of the stages. All of the little speedrunning tricks for the missions work here as well, from the Speed Highway mission clip, going slightly underwater to avoid the lasers for Seaside Hill, to whatever this thing is for City Escape. The M-Speed trick also works, which I tested out in the Shadow rival fight. Perfect Chaos was the same as usual as well, but this time his textures didn't unload when going for the speedrunning route, which was nice. But with this boss defeated, we can leave the Dreamcast era and head to the modern era for Sonic. For the third and final era for Generations, I did all the 3D levels first, since that's what you would typically do for a speedrun. I found 2 of the Chaos for Crisis City, and I spotted the third one at the end of the stage. Rooftop Run is always a fun and easy stage to play, and the Planet Wisp modern skip still works. We go to the shop to buy a Thunder Shield, which will let us double jump for the remaining 2D levels. And with this double jump, we can just blitz through large chunks of these stages, like in Crisis City here, and Rooftop Run. The Planet Wisp's out of bounds skip works as well, and we can even collect all 5 red rings here, so we are essentially skipping the worst parts of the stage. With the last full stages complete, it's back to the rival fight, this time against Silver, and then the 3 missions to unlock the boss for this era. Oh hey, check it out, the Crisis City skip still works. And while we're at it, the Planet Wisp spike trick also works. After that, we defeat Egg Dragoon. Now, there is a speedrunning trick for Egg Dragoon, but I am not able to do it at all. But from the way the boss moves, it felt like you could do it, but I don't have confirmation. Now, for the final boss of the game, we have Time Eater. They patched out the out of bounds skip for this boss, unfortunately, but it wasn't as bad to beat as I remembered in my childhood. I didn't get the Can't Touch This achievement in my first try, which you get by beating the boss without getting hit. You can still get this achievement if you get hit by the debris laying around, but just make sure not to get hit by the boss himself. With the main game complete, now I will finish all the missions, and well, here's how it went. All of the missions were fairly easy except for Vector's Run with the Beat mission, which I was failing at for 20 or so minutes. But besides that, you can beat all of the missions in your first try. You don't have to get any of the S ranks thankfully as well, you only have to complete the mission. There's also a small trick you can do once you finish the missions. Instead of running after the music note, you can just simply jump at the bell 3 times and you will just pick up the item. Now with all of the missions complete, I only have the red rings and the Chaos left. I've already collected about half of the red rings throughout this playthrough, and I already know where most of them are. I only have to look for the Chao. But before hunting for the collectibles, I went to the store to buy all the skills that I could from the points that I got for beating the different stages and missions, and I built out little kits to make it easier for collecting. But since this was my first time playing with these skills in like 6 years, I just ended up getting rid of all of them after Chemical Plant. Now the Chaos weren't really hard to find. The most difficult case was in City Escape, since they were like inside of the wanted posters. But one thing to look out for was that every Chao looks different, so you really have to keep your eyes wide open. But these stages aren't very long, so I was able to find them all within an hour or so of searching. And with 8.2 hours, I have 100% completed Sonic Generations, getting every achievement in this half of this game. So without further ado, let's begin Shadow Generations. The game controls are closer to Sonic Frontiers than Generations. Now, I haven't played Frontiers in a while, but this game felt much better. But that could also be because the levels were designed around this movement, unlike in Frontiers where they just ripped off level designs straightly from other games without making any changes. The stages were also very long, and it feels very similar to Sonic Unleashed in terms of length. After beating Acts 1 and 2, we get our first achievement. And then we get brought up to the hub world, where it is a white void, just like Sonic Generations. But in Shadow Generations, the hub world is a 3D space instead of the 2D hallway. And the lore reason behind this is that Shadow has a much more complex past, which I think is a very cool explanation. From the Space Colony arc, we go into Sonic Heroes with Rail Canyon Acts 1 and 2. Similar to Generations, we have to beat the missions before we can fight the boss from this era, but this time, there are only 2 missions per act, so 4 missions total per stage, instead of the 10 from Generations. We also have to beat every mission in this game to fight the final boss, so there's no point in skipping any of them. But I'm 100%ing this game anyway, so I wouldn't be skipping. Anyway, like in Sonic Generations, these missions have a music note collectible after beating the stage. But there are also collectibles within the missions themselves, but thankfully, it isn't difficult to find them. With all the missions available to us complete, we can now climb up to the top of the tower, where we collect machinery parts along the way. Machinery parts are these little nuts and bolts that we can find in the overworld, and there are 80 in total. At this point, I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave them alone and to collect them all at once at the end, or if I should just collect them as I see them. And this is not foreshadowing. Foreshadowing? Get it? I didn't mention this before, but after beating a boss, Shadow gets new powers that make him stronger, where we get the Doom Surf power-up for being the Bio-Lizard. And as the name suggests, it lets us surf through the water without drowning, which is very useful for the next stage, Wind Valley from Sonic 2006. We traverse across the winds and the waters to get ourselves the next achievement. And well, at this point, at least one stage from each of the games that Shadow was in has been completed, and with only 3 levels, this wouldn't be enough. Similar to the explanation of the 3D world, Shadow Generations also introduced the concept that the Time Eater can send us and others ahead of the timeline as well, which is why we end up in Sunset Overdrive from Sonic Forces. The collectibles from the main stages and the missions are music, art, and history keys, which are then used to open up treasure chests in the overworld. As the name of the keys suggests, you get, well, music, art, and Shadow's history, which can be viewed in the collectibles room. I went out of my way to grab a few of these chests before fighting the next boss, Neo Metal. We are stuck in the water for this boss, meaning that we are locked into Doom Surf. I had difficulties with its controls during Wind Valley, and this boss did not make things easier for me, but thankfully it didn't really need me to do much. I just simply had to avoid the lasers and other obstacles while rolling into the bombs using the bumper buttons on my controller. The bombs would then bounce back to Neosonic, taking his health down. Phase 2 was more of the same as well, but in 2D instead of 3D. We get an achievement for beating Neo Metal. Continuing the trend of going into the future, Shadow is now in the Sonic Frontier stage, where Shadow wasn't even present in this game, unless there's like some hidden DLC. We now get this Doom Slingshot ability, which will send you up to high speeds really fast as long as you're in this purple goo. There are these little orbs that you can latch onto as well, and I had so much trouble with these when I started out, but as I played the game more and more, they actually became really fun parts of the stage for me. We get an achievement for beating the Frontier's Chaos Islands. We only had to do one stage before unlocking the boss of this era instead of 2. However, the game makes you complete all the remaining missions, so you are actually forced to beat all the missions to even beat the story mode for this game. But as mentioned before though, there aren't that many missions in comparison to Sonic Generations, and these stages are also short as well. This is also the point in the story where Shadow and Sonic meet, and they have that boss fight that happened during Sonic Generations, where Shadow loses. Unfortunately, we didn't get to fight Sonic like we could have during Sonic Adventure 2, but we get a cool cutscene out of it as well, so I'll take what I can get, I guess. Similar to the Metal Overlord or Neo Metal boss fight, Mephiles takes advantage of the new abilities that we gain, where most of the boss fight takes place with the Doom Slingshot ability. One of my favorite things about this fight is that Shadow doesn't recognize who Mephiles is, because technically, Mephiles isn't real and Sonic 06 never happened. We can see this because during the boss fight, Mephiles begs to get back into the timeline, and at the end of the fight he says that he only wants to exist. After beating Mephiles, we unlock the flying ability, where we then have to fly up this one last obstacle course, where at the end we get introduced to the last stage of the game. While we're climbing up this obstacle course, with the last stage being Radical Highway, I think it's very poetic, because that was a stage that introduced Shadow to the entire Sonic universe. But this time, the story is flipped, where instead of looking for revenge on humanity to save Maria, instead, Shadow is fighting the final boss to save humanity. After beating the 2 Radical Highway stages, we get one more achievement, only leaving us with the final Devil Doom boss fight. This boss fight takes a little slice from all the previous bosses in the game and combines it into this huge 3-phase fight, with the first phase taking inspiration from Neo Metal, the second phase combining the slingshot with different platforming, similar to the Mephiles and Biolizard boss fights, and then in the last phase, use your newly acquired wings to fly into Devil Doom. After beating Devil Doom, we get the achievement for all the stages completed, and at this point we have completed the main story, only leaving the collectibles and other tidbits. After beating this boss, I went back to get all the remaining S ranks, which just essentially means I have to beat the stage fairly quickly and without any deaths. I then went to try out the Can't Touch This achievement, and if you've seen the Sonic Generation version of this achievement, it's the same premise, just don't let the final boss touch you. This took me about 40 minutes though, since I didn't really know what counts as a hit and what doesn't, and also the final flying phase caught me out a few times, and it takes a while to get there, especially with all the non-skippable cutscenes throughout this boss fight. And with those achievements done, I have only got the collectible left, which I've spent about 2.5 hours looking for. I wasn't actually able to beat this game before going on an overseas trip, with only about 6 chests left and 1 machinery piece remaining. This stung me a little bit. But when I got back from my trip, I found them all relatively quickly. There was no magnet to find any of the machine parts, which sucks. I think that would have been a cool quality of life update if you got a magnet after fighting, let's say, 60 out of the 80 pieces, or something similar to that. But since it was over a week since the game released, I just googled the chest locations image and gave myself a little clue. It didn't outright tell me where the chests were since the maps don't have any vertical scaling, but it was nice to have some pointers. And with only 1 machinery piece left, I've spent about 40 minutes looking around the overworld, only for it to turn out to be one of the early ones I looked at and decided to not collect for some reason. The foreshadowing was crazy. It turns out there were other collectibles as well, like the Robotnik diary notes. I've only had to collect one more to get the final collectible, and then I got it. And then I realized that I was still missing a collectible, where it turns out that I just didn't grab one of the bells. I mean, to be fair, look at this. Like, it looked like it was collected. But anyway, after I got that last music note, I got the 40th and final achievement. And those are all 40 achievements collected for Sonic X Shadow Generations. Thank you for watching. Cheers.